Okay, Will asks, modern physiology vindicates Darwin's dream. Could Curt comment on the idea that you can reflexively influence your phenotype in a Lamarckian way through use or disuse? Is this what he means by saying that culture or domestication is more important in selection than mutation? We looked over the study, I breezed over it, and it didn't seem very good. But I didn't have.
No, I think it's an easy question. It's two questions. First is, is there evidence that we can modify the expression of our genotype? Absolutely. Look at it. There's basically a switch that turns on a section and off a section, right? And then there's the code within each section. So, and it's not like it's like the, how do I say this? Genes play symphonies. They don't play chopsticks, right? There's a lot going on at any one time. So it's more like what combination of things is going on. So we can change what's active and what's inactive, and that can be transmitted. And so that is largely, there's also multiple copies of some genes, right? So you can turn off more or less of them. So if you look at when they say, well, you can modify this stuff, certain things appear to be expressible or suppressible over generations by some sort of stress that turns something on. And this is, you got to remember that the cell that makes you is coming from your mother's egg and your father's sperm, and the egg in particular has more information in it than in the just gene alone. It has an environment. The egg is an environment to some degree, and so is her body. So these expressions can be carried. So that's it. So what is the influence of that? I keep seeing some people trying to get attention by claiming it's more than it is, but I can't find any evidence that it's more than it is. All we know is that, yeah, you can have an SNP movement, right? You can have a little bit on your gene, any given gene, switch to mutation. You can have, but largely when we're talking about intergenerational transfer of expression, it has to do with the regulation of what's turned on and what's turned off. And I don't know why that would be a mystery. That's pretty obvious. There's a tendency among people to think that the genetic process is more mechanical than it is. In other words, it's more simple than it is. It's actually a very complicated dance between the nucleus of a cell and the DNA expression and the chemical environment in which those two things are cooperating. So that's why there's only an 80% determinism to genetics, right? Because the other 20% is God effing knows what it is, but it isn't nurture. Nurture is up here.
Well, I think you were talking about epigenetics, and
yes.
For that I'd suggest an article on Razib Khan's Substack. You can take it with you, which debunks the usual notions people have about it.
Yeah.
And yes. That, yes, some simple organism use it to inherit into next generation, but this is practically non-existent in complex organisms like us. So there's pretty much a reset in next generation. The main function of epigenetics is that different cells in your body, in different parts of your body, do different things.
Yes, thank you. So was I not rigid enough? In other words, was I not clear enough?
Okay, I think we covered it together.
Martin was clear. I was trying to correct the thinking, and Martin said it more clearly. The second answer is, what does he mean by culture domestication is more important in selection than mutation? It means that mutations exist, right? But it's who screws who and has who many kids is way more influential than those things, because most of the time, mutations get filtered out.
Yeah, and most of them are on genes that don't do anything, and
Don't do anything.
the rest, most that do anything, are negative and get filtered out, and then there are the very rare positive ones.
Yes. So very rare positive ones survive. Most of the ones we see that survive have to do with a single thing, and that's neotenic expression. And I don't know, there's a great video by a terrible speaker, but he's taken a couple images of how it's really one beautiful diagram of how a neural stem cell, right, grows through its lifespan and becomes becomes different kinds of cells, right? And so when you realize that it's sort of like there's a salmon go back to their spawning ground, it's like, right? So it's sort of a thing like that. The fish are trying to go home. Well, neurons basically evolve that way, and then they adapt to their local circumstance. So it's a very complex process. But if you look at a 2-year-old's brain and you look at a 6-year-old's brain, it's a big effing difference. Heck, if you look at an infant's brain and a 2-year-old's brain, it's a big difference. Because there's like nobody home in the infant's brain, right? There's nobody there at all. And a 2-year-old, there's somebody there, and then a 6-year-old, it's like there's a lot going on here. You look at, the Einstein's brain type of category, and there's like, okay, there's a lot of crap going on up here. So when I say cultural domestication is more important, it's that there's a tendency. I have this problem with what's his name? Who's the genetics guy that I always argue with? J-Man, who's sort of like one of the better guys in genetics. Sorry,
I thought I knew who, but no.
And he's got this thing against the term group selection. And that's because it's sort of like the definition of strict construction. It means different things in the colloquial version and the technical version. Well, the same thing with group selection in the technical. Right? It's obvious that groups favor certain traits, right? And they get expressed. It's all right. So and it's obvious that does affect groups, right? And we can see that because one of the things that's happened is the perception of what's beautiful in women has changed over time in different cultures as the perception of the world's spectrum of what beautiful women look like has changed, right? So we've seen this happen. Right? So groups do tend to prefer some sort of it. But his point is that selection always happens between two individuals. Well, it does, but I mean, we're not always living in this situation where we have this unique pairing off, right? We have a lot of cheating, we have a lot of premarital, and we have all sorts of stuff going on, right? So there's a lot of selection going on, and women evolved to select to reproduce from different men who take care of them. So and say, does group selection exist? So that, well, I mean, yeah. Not in the way that the industry talks about it, but in the way that the colloquial version is. Yeah, there's a tendency of people in different groups to favor different traits. And the way we talk about it is groups tend to adapt to the successful group evolutionary strategy they employ.
Yeah.
Okay, Moritz.
All right.
Hey guys, continue.
Okay, so you don't have vaginas behind you today. You have a horse.
I'm in Austria now.
Are you
You're
disappointed?
in Austria now.
Is it possible to ever catch you twice in the same country?
Good
We
question.
got him.
You'll have to try hard.
We got him twice in Croatia. And now we got him in Austria. We got him a couple of times in wherever the vaginas were behind you on them.
That's where
Apparently they weren't vaginas, they were biological. But I'm gonna keep rubbing that in as long as I can get away with it. All right, so what's the next thing? Did I answer that well enough?
I guess the only thing. Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say maybe the only other dimension that I was thinking about when I heard that question was like depending on your culture and your incentives. that is going to change, like, to some degree who's successful, which then is going to influence like who mates with whom. Like in this culture, right? Like being a parasite is maybe a little bit more favored. And so you've got maybe a little bit more tendency for women to go towards those people or parasites. Whereas if that's being completely restricted, right, then who's rising to the top? More of your reciprocal people, and that's maybe shifting a little bit who's mating with whom.
Yes. All right. So I think I'm sure I answered. I don't know. There's something in Will who asked this question. There's something he's trying to actually get at that I'm going to interpret as he's trying to deduce too much about where our behavior comes from without. He's trying to do too much, and he's looking for help in that way. So I would have to talk to him interpersonally to interrogate him enough. Well, to interrogate. I'd have enough interrogative with him enough that I could figure out what he's actually trying to get across there.
Well, I don't know which will it is because we now have multiple wills in the community.
Fine.